Okay, so I am going to be going over the structures seen from a sagittal cut of the brain. All right. Um, it gets a little tricky looking at all of these structures, but I have a little, pathway, little tricks to helping me keep it all in line. You can see every single division from this view. Okay, so there's a lot to label. Um, but hopefully, if we just go slow, we'll be able to keep it all in track. Okay? So, first thing we want to do is identify that this is the anterior portion and this is the posterior portion of the brain, right? And then, of course, you have all of this up here, cerebrum. This is the diencephalon, brainstem, and cerebellum. So, perfect. All right. So we're going to start with this white track right here, labeled number 7. We're going to go from anterior to posterior, okay? So this is the corpus callosum, all right? Corpus callosum. The corpus callosum drops into the fornix, okay? So we go corpus callosum into the fornix. Now, in between those two structures, there is a cavity, all right? This is all hollow. It's actually filled with cerebrospinal fluid, which is actually created in the ventricle. This is the lateral ventricle. It is the cerebral spinal fluid is what helps the brain with buoyancy, basically heals it. Really, really important stuff going on within this ventricle. Okay, so we had the corpus callosum into the fornix. This is the lateral ventricle. Okay, from the fornix, it drops right into the hypothalamus. All right. From the hypothalamus, we're going to be moving posteriorly to the thalamus. A little bit more posterior, and we drop into the pineal gland. The pineal gland is this pink structure here. Okay. So from the pineal gland, we're still posterior, but we're going to go inferior a little bit. All right. There's a bulge right here. I'm going to outline it, and a smaller bulge here, okay? So this is the superior colliculi, and then into the inferior colliculi, all right? So let's go over that one more time. We had the corpus callosum. It drops into the fornix. That drops into the hypothalamus. Moving posteriorly, we have the thalamus. A little bit more posterior into the pineal gland, then into the superior colliculi and the inferior colliculi. Okay? Now we're going to go to the underside of the brain. All right? So we're still in the brain, but we're just on the inferior portion of it. All right? We're going to look at the structure labeled 31. All right? This will always be the color white. No matter if it's a model or a sheep brain or an image, it is white. And that is because it's the optic chiasm. The optic chiasm is where the two optic nerves connect before splitting off to go to the eyes. So here they connect, and then here one of them would go over to the eye and make the eye work. All right. So here is the optic chiasm. Moving posteriorly from that, we have a structure called the mammillary body. All right. From the mammillary body, we kind of hit the brainstem, right? So right here we have the midbrain. Then we have the pons at the bulge, and then right here we have the medulla oblongata. Okay. Remember, the medulla oblongata is right under the cerebellum. So you can see the cerebellum here. Within the cerebellum, you can see these white structures, okay? They're kind of branching structures. This is actually white matter with the surrounding gray matter. But the white structures are actually called arbor vitae, and that's because they look like a tree. And arbor vitae translates to tree of life. Okay, so tree of life or arbor vitae is in the cerebellum. Now, right under the cerebellum, you have this whole structure here. And this is a cavity, just like it was over here. So this was the lateral ventricle. This is the fourth ventricle. So the fourth ventricle is right under the cerebellum. All right, there's also a little structure here to note. Leading to the fourth ventricle, you have the cerebral aqueduct. Okay, cerebral aqueduct flows between the cerebellum and the brainstem and goes right into the fourth ventricle. Okay, now this is all inside the brain. There is one structure, though, that kind of hangs outside of the brain. On top of what we call dura mater, which we'll get to in a moment in a different video. So on the most inferior portion of the brain, a little exterior though, we have what's called the pituitary gland, okay? And well, that's just probably the most important gland in my opinion. But let's go over it one more time. We have the corpus callosum dropping into the fornix, going into the hypothalamus, then to the thalamus, to the pineal gland, back towards the superior colliculi, then the inferior colliculi. We got the cerebral aqueduct coming down into the fourth ventricle. We have arbor vitae going throughout the cerebellum. On the inferior portion of the brain, we have the optic chiasm into the mammillary body. And then, of course, we have the pituitary gland on the external portion of the body. Now, I know this is a little bit confusing. Hopefully, connecting all of the structures in a nice, pathway helps it, makes it a little bit easier for you to label. What I started doing when I was learning this was actually just writing it out and drawing how it moved throughout the brain. So having this diagram side by side with a sagittal view of the brain definitely helped me. So let's just see. Maybe this will help you as well. We have, of course, anterior and posterior. So the corpus callosum into the fornix, into the hypothalamus, to the thalamus, to the pineal gland, superior colliculi, inferior colliculi. Okay? Lateral ventricle is in between the corpus callosum and the fornix. On the underside of the brain, okay, because this is inferior. Okay, you have the optic chiasm that goes into the mammillary body. Okay, now the brain stem would be about here, and the cerebellum would be about here. Okay, in between the brainstem and the cerebellum, you have the cerebral aqueduct, which drops into the fourth ventricle. Right above the fourth ventricle is the cerebellum, which has arbor vitae. Okay, so hopefully this helps you keep it all in line. All right,